You wrote the book on Bitcoin, didn't you? Bitcoin, the Future of Money, the very first book.
Yeah, back in 2014.
It needs an update, mate, because El Salvador's saying it's legal tender. It's a big day, right?
It's a huge day. It's not just a huge day for El Salvador, it's a huge day for Bitcoin, and it's a huge day in the evolution of money. We've seen Bitcoin just go from a few renegade computer coders, a few libertarian computer coders, to the dark net, to a mainstream investment vehicle, and now we see the first nation state adopt it. It is a huge day, and the significance is enormous. And I have to say, I have to give great credit to the El Salvador Prime Minister, President Bukele, Nayib Bukele, for the tremendous leadership he's shown. Often when you have a government, they take the decision that is most beneficial to their career and involves the least risk. So he's really put his head above the parapet, and he's taking an enormous risk, because if it doesn't work, he's going to look like a fool. But if it does work, he's going to be the guy who set the trend, and you will see country after country copy him.
Now, he is what you call a populist presence. Some would just say that means he's popular. El Salvador, a lot of people rely on remittances, workers working overseas. I think it's about a quarter of the El Salvador economy, 25% of their GDP is remittances.
Not quite that much, but it's still enormous, especially from the US.
So transferring that by Bitcoin should lower bank charges, and I think there are ATMs around El Salvador popping up now where people can exchange Bitcoin for cash, so it becomes legal tender. Everybody must accept it. Does this show that Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies created online by independent people, they're really entering the mainstream now?
It totally shows that. It's the next stage in Bitcoin's evolution. And you're right, I think there are something like 200 Bitcoin ATMs now in El Salvador. And it's worth defining what is meant by legal tender. Because if you look at the sort of OED definition of legal tender...
The Oxford English Dictionary.
The Oxford English Dictionary, yeah. The definition is that coins or banknotes that must be offered in payment of debt. Now, the key word there is debt.
Yeah.
Now, I've got an oddball who emails me every now and then, and he's trying to...
Haven't we all?
we do, and he's trying to reintroduce silver into the British monetary system by stealth. And his means of doing that is to go in, when he does his weekly shop in Tesco's, he demands that they accept his silver Britannias, which technically...
It's still legal tender.
...are legal tender. And in fact, he's even got himself arrested when he demanded that a BP garage accepted. You cannot, just because it's legal tender, it doesn't mean you're obliged to use it in a shop or a store or a merchant. And I think Bitcoin adoption in El Salvador is only something like 5%. 4.7%, which is roughly the international average. It's roughly the same as what we have here.
Now, Dominic, I want to come on to the idea, we haven't got much time, as ever on television, but of investing in Bitcoin, fraud. There's a lot of fraud around. The FCA, our main financial regulator in the UK, possibly timed with this El Salvador news. They're on the front of the FT today saying you must be really careful if you invest in Bitcoin. But just before we get to that as the final answer, just briefly, what's the kind of geopolitical significance of this? Could Bitcoin ultimately replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency? There are only 21 million Bitcoin will ever be created by this electronic mining thing. And in a world where governments are printing money, people are going to want Bitcoin as a store of wealth, right?
The more that governments print, the more they increase the likelihood of their own downfall. It's as simple as that. Bitcoin is a currency designed for the internet. It's a borderless currency. It's not designed around nation states. The growth potential of Bitcoin, because of that fact, it already is the reserve cash system of the internet.
Yeah.
And its potential for growth, even from these high levels, is extraordinary. So, given that enormous potential that it has, every investor, the risk is not owning any, because you're missing, it's an asymmetrical bet.
Now, you are an experienced investor in your own right. You write for Money Week, as I said, a specialised investment magazine. Just in the final few minutes we've got together, talk to viewers who've seen the price of Bitcoin go up and up and up, then down, then up and up and up and down, very volatile. A couple of words of warning about investing in Bitcoin.
You always get this criticism from no-coiners that Bitcoin
Is that what they're called?
Absolutely. And by the way, you talked about the FCA and fraud there.
Yeah.
The UK authorities need to look, if you're talking about fraud, the UK authorities need to look at their own monetary policy and their own measures of inflation, because that is the great fraud at the heart of our society. And your last section was all about the unaffordability of housing. Not one person mentioned fiat money and the cause of the monetary system on house price inflation, not measuring inflation properly, suppressing interest rates. So I would make that point. Secondly, the criticism from no coiners is, oh, Bitcoin's volatile. Bitcoin's lost 50% of its value in April or May, or whenever the correction was this year. But the point is, Bitcoin went back to $30,000. And it began the year at $29,000. It's now at $50,000. So even amongst this huge volatility, the trajectory is up. The low that Bitcoin found at $30,000 is 10 times the low of the previous bear market low.
We must be careful. We're not here providing financial advice, of course. Neither of us are qualified to do that, though we like to think we know a thing or two about the subject, particularly... Yeah, a lot of people will be offered over social media ways to buy Bitcoin. Just briefly, what should they be scared of?
Caveat emptor. Do your own due diligence. Only go to trusted sources. Don't buy Bitcoin because you got a WhatsApp message from a bloke, even if you recognise his name, because the chances are it's somebody else impersonating that person. It is the Wild West. It is extremely dangerous, but the future has always been established in the Wild West.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.